It's the mashup you've all been waiting for, everybody. It's the CBS boys and the FantasyPros boys in a little tag team. I feel like, Welsh, we should have worn our luchador masks. I do have mine behind me. I can't grab it. You know what?
I got mine right here, but it's going to mess up the hair. But I'm going to mess up the hair. I don't think I can.
Mine will not mess up my hair because it just will not. So Joey Cannoli is back officially, everybody. And, Cheesemo is back because look, if we're going to have a tag team match, it will be in a steel cage. Frank Stampfl, Chris Towers, great to see you guys. Frank Stampfl, I just want to check in on you because I'm going to cut a promo on your Yankees right now. It's been a tough, I don't know, a couple weeks. Let's just say a couple months because you lost Soto too.
Got some tears there, Frankie. Do we need to wipe those tears away from you there, brother?
But let's talk about it, Frankie boy. How are you holding up as a Yankee fan? What's Yankee Nation doing right now?
You're muted.
Oh, it looks like Frankie's muted.
Oh, so, just like Garrett Cole's
That's
arm.
how bad things are going.
You are muted, sir.
Yes, I am finally muted. Maybe it should stay that way because I don't have much to say about the Yankees. It has been a rough go, as you pointed out. Losing Juan Soto, he looks great in spring training. Losing Clay Holmes, I was actually happy about that one. Now he looks like a fantasy ace so far in spring training. Like, how can it get any worse? Well, I'll tell you how. Garrett Cole done for the season. We're putting our hopes in Will Warren and Carlos Carrasco. So they have to make a trade or sign somebody at some point. I don't know when that's going to happen, but I think this is the team that they are going into the season with. And very clearly they have some holes. So it's not looking great right now, Jeff.
Hey, at least DJ LeMahieu and Giancarlo Stanton are in midseason form.
Towers from the top rope. Oh, it's so good. Towers, it's not shocking that Garrett Cole had the Tommy John. I don't think anybody was shocked about that. I was the least shocked human being. I kept saying this is just the inevitability of things. I'm waiting for Thanos to snap his fingers and make it so. But, to Frank's point, it does feel a little weird. Like all of a sudden the mojo in that town has kind of shifted a little bit. You lose Juan Soto. Clay Holmes, as you said, looks really good in spring. It is spring. I don't want to take too much out of it. But you think the power has shifted a little bit in New York? Because, boy, oh boy, it is the 12th of March, and Frank Stampfl is not happy.
So the Mets ate the Yankees lunch this offseason for sure, signing Holmes and Soto. But here's the thing, all right? You look at that roster, it's not a great team yet. For all the money that they spent and adding Juan Soto is a huge deal, obviously. But you look at like losing Frankie Montas was actually a pretty big deal for this team. Like Paul Blackburn is going to be in the rotation for the Mets. This is not an unbeatable juggernaut. And if the Yankees won more games than them this season, even after losing Garrett Cole, I wouldn't be shocked. Like, I think those two rosters are fairly comparable. Maybe the Mets have a little better high-end talent, but like Brandon Nimmo's already falling apart and the season hasn't even started yet.
That's not a bad thing, Chris. I think the rest of the guys, the Acuñas of the world, maybe Brett Beatty's of the world, I have faith in the kids that are still coming through, but you're right.
What's interesting though?
The rotation still does not look like a superstar rotation.
Yeah. With both of these teams, what's really interesting is someone put it in the chat. I think it's the obvious. We're all looming around, and it's funny, you two, Stampfl and Towers, as a Marlins fan and a Yankees fan, the trade that we're all trying to ship is a Sandy Alcantara. Sandy Alcantara feels like the kind of cure to all teams. The Mets should be as involved as the Yankees with their rotational issues, how much they're spending and their commitment. Both of these teams, and by the way, they both have the assets, the prospect assets, or whatever it really is at the end of the day is going to take, whether it's lower prospects or close to the majors or at major league level. Both of these teams can compete with each other. That I'm surprised that we're not hearing more rumors about it because, and it's funny, the Yankees feel a little bit more destitute for some reason right now, where it's like if the Mets were to get it, we're like, oh man, that was the last piece they needed. If the Yankees were to get Sandy, we'd be like, well, that's a good band-aid to this issue, but both should be fighting this off. And I completely agree. I think Sandy Alcantara should end up on one of these two teams.
The last thing I want is for the Yankees to compete with the Mets for another player this offseason. So let's just not do that anymore.
That's right, because Uncle Stevie's not afraid to pay. Ooh,
let's bid up that price. Let's see a couple of good months from Sandy. Let's get to July, and let's see what people are willing to offer.
All right, Towers and I are in agreement on that one. All right, let's get to the sleepers because it's hard this year, and every year it gets harder and harder to find guys that people aren't really talking maybe enough about. because there's so much coverage on fantasy baseball. There's so many sleeper shows and sleeper segments. But to me, this is all about, some of the guys that are really flying under that radar in ADP that at this stage, still at this juncture in the mid-March range, nobody's really talking up. So, Frank, let's start with you because you want to discuss Jesús Luzardo. And to me, this is a pick with all upside. The ADP is really late. 2 years ago, it was a very useful pitcher. Now he finds himself moving from Miami to a Phillies team that has a much better offense, much better defense. I think now with Romano, I think you feel pretty good about the bullpen. So it's really just a no-brainer, I feel like, at this point to take a shot on Luzardo. If it doesn't work out, it's not going to cost you anything. You cut him and you move on. But if it does, you got a fifth starter on a team that could win this division, Frank.
Yeah, I'm mostly just looking to buy the dip here. Luzardo was a top 90 pick in drafts last year. His current FantasyPros ADP is 259. So how the mighty have fallen, and I kind of get it. I mean, he was a disaster last year, an ERA at 5, a 125 whip, the fastball velocity down 1.5 miles per hour. I think that is a big key for Luzardo. He really needs to be up over 96 miles per hour on his fastball. He averaged 96 on that pitch the 2 years prior with the Marlins and a 50 start stretch in 2022 and 23 with a 3.48 ERA, a 115 whip, 10.6 K per nine, and a 14% swinging strike rate. He was legitimately a SP2, SP3 for fantasy, and now he's been forgotten. So I think a lot of people have been burned by Jesús Luzardo, myself included, and I think a lot of people just don't want to go back to that well. It's been mixed results so far in spring, really small sample size. He got blown up his last time out, but the good news is that the fastball velocity is up. He has been consistently up over 96 miles per hour, which is where we need Jesús Luzardo to be. It is a negative park shift going from Miami to Philly, but it also is just a much better team. So the run support will be there. Joe, you mentioned the bullpen. On top of Jordan Romano, they have other great arms in that bullpen, Orion Kerkering, Jose Alvarado. So all of those things combined, I think the wins will be there. I think the strikeouts will be there. There are durability issues here. It's a very low floor, but after pick 250, I'm shooting for the moon. I'm looking for upside, and I think Jesús Luzardo gives us that.
Question from Fenway Cheap Seats here. Luzardo or Jackson Jobe? Interesting because I feel like we take for granted that Luzardo's been around forever, but he's still just 27 years old, and I feel like everybody needs a reminder of that.
I like both of these guys, but I would lean with Jesús Luzardo. I might be in the minority in that, though.
They're two of my favorite late round picks at pitcher, and I love the upside for both. I think I would lean Luzardo just because Jobe, like every time I watch him, it's just, why aren't you getting strikeouts? The stuff looks so good. And then I think his most recent start, he had 2 strikeouts in 3 innings. He gets like 3 whiffs on 50 pitches. It's like, you should be the next big thing. And it just hasn't been there yet. The strikeout rate was weirdly low at AA last year as well. So I would lean Luzardo. Yeah.
All right,
yeah, funny, just real quick, just on Jobe, just to throw up for 1 second, so we talked about him, is he's always been predictable. Back in the AFL when I watched him, that was one of his big problems is as far as what was coming, that pitchability was very predictable. And he said this year, his opening statement about, I think it was that Vlad strikeout was like, well, I'm going to just start throwing my best stuff and let's see if you can hit it. And it's like, well, if you're pitching to a lot more contact ability, then, you're probably going to have some lower strikeouts. It's he's not Kirby-ish, but like that's what Kirby do. Just get it in the zone, try to induce weak contact. Why the hell didn't you have more strikeouts? That's kind of where Jobe sits in that. I think it's really, really close. Luzardo's injury history maybe puts a little bit of a question mark into wanting to invest in him over the upside of a Jobe, but Jobe's upside might be actually the bigger thing in question.
All right, Chris Towers, there's a catcher on your list here. I want to talk about a guy that I was very high on going into this draft season. It's tough to find batting average too, and he's a guy that can give you that. Ivan Herrera of the St. Louis Cardinals. I know there's some questions about, well, how much will he catch this year in terms of splitting any kind of duty, but it seems like it's his job. So I want to try to put this as mildly as possible. The Cardinals are in a rebuild. They're trying to find an identity. At this stage, you think that is why potentially maybe Ivan Herrera is just kind of floating around there in ADP as long as he is, because the Cardinals right now are just not a sexy team to be involved in the fantasy world?
They're also just kind of like, the last few years have just been kind of weird and like aimless for the Cardinals, where it feels like they should be turning over to a full rebuild. And they did try this offseason. They never found a taker for Nolan Arenado, but it just feels like they never quite commit to one mode or the other. Like, I'm seeing reports that like Nick Ciani is going to be the starting center fielder over Victor Scott. That doesn't make any sense. Just play the young guy. But at catcher, they did move Wilson Contreras to first base. It sounds like it's going to be a mixture of Ivan Herrera. And I was a little worried that they might prefer Pages because he's a better defensive catcher. He's had a really rough spring, whereas Ivan Herrera has been terrific. OPS over 900 so far. He has done nothing but hit at the high level of the minors. 867 OPS at AAA. Gets called up last year and shows really, really strong offensive skills. 301 average, 800 OPS, but the underlying numbers fully back it up, arguably even better. He had a 293 XBA, but the power metrics were better on the underlying side. He had a 366 xWOBA, only a 21% strikeout rate, which is right where it was at AAA. I've been saying all preseason, I think Ivan Herrera is like the best plan A as a number 2 catcher in a 2-catcher league, but he's a totally viable plan B in a 1-catcher league. If you end up waiting and get Ivan Herrera as your number 1 catcher, I think that will work because I do think there is, frankly, top 5 upside if everything goes right for Ivan Herrera.
Yeah, I agree. And I think you broke it down very well, too, about the spring did matter. I always say the spring training doesn't matter except for the guys that it does. And it mattered that Herrera hit. And it mattered to your point, too, that any competition didn't overtake him. And I think that is very important to look at. Welsh, let's get to one of the names on your sleeper list here. It's Cristopher Sanchez. And Sanchez is the guy that you have talked about on some of our shows before. Another pitcher on the Philadelphia Phillies. So a lot of value there with those fighting Phils in that Philadelphia rotation. It's not just good alliteration. It's good fantasy. So let's talk about this player here. Projections have him at a 3.43 ERA, 171 innings. And look, Sanchez coming off a strong 2024 campaign. And obviously, Welsh, you feel like he can build on that or at least copy and paste from last season.
Yeah, and I think this opens up a good conversation also about like the discussion of like, you know, what is sleepers? We always have this, and there's a distinction kind of across the board. You had said an idea of guys really overpowering where they're being drafted or they're being ranked. Obviously, we've talked about some deeper names. I'm not so sure Chris Sanchez is even as much a sleeper because, boy, over the last week, I mean, when I had submitted this, he's moved up like 20, 30 spots, and he really wasn't in like a full sleeper camp. But what I'm doing here is I'm taking the idea of a player that really still has, and we are sleeping on where he is being ranked or drafted, that can dramatically overtake it. So I don't think sleepers have to be just in the 3, the 4, the 500. So for anybody that gets like Chris Sanchez, you know, like I get it, like I understand it, but you know, we want to talk to everybody about this. And the interesting thing is Chris Sanchez is still on ECR, FantasyPros ECR, SP 47. So I think that's important to know here, because I think what you're looking at is a potential upside of Chris Sanchez being a top 25 SP, maybe a top 20. I mean, we're talking about the highest percentage of return here. But, you know, last season we got massive innings. We got 181 innings. Fantastic. That's what we're looking for. Low walk rates, great. Low barrel against, great. Good ERA, phenomenal. So what do we need more of? We need strikeouts. Well, this year we've seen a double, like 1.5 to 2 mile per hour increase on his stuff. We've seen him add a cutter, which is going to open up the possibility of some of these strikeouts. We've also seen a ridiculous spring where he struck out 12 in 7 innings and walked 1 so far. So you take a lot of the, you know, the underlying stuff clearly of what you get with Jesús Luzardo and how cheap he is, because Sanchez is becoming a lot less cheap, and it's going to be a lot more eye-rolly of the idea of him being like a sleeper. But people that are really locking in right now, when you see him in SP 47, he should be a massive target because the team context of the Phillies is phenomenal. And if you go and look, I believe it is ATC. He is technically projected for the 3rd most wins in baseball, tied with plenty of players. And he's a top 23 or 24 WAR pitcher in both the BAT and ATC. So 2 of the top projection systems from a WAR perspective, he's a top 25 SP. So is it outlandish to think that Chris Sanchez can be a top 20, 25 pitcher? No, I don't think so. Is he a sleeper because you know his name? Like, or is he not a sleeper because you know his name? No, but if he's SP 47 and he can almost double his uptake here, yeah, I think there still is some potential for that. And lastly, just innings, man. You can get 170, 180 innings. It's huge. So he's the bigger of the names we're going to talk about, but I want to make sure we're not just 100% catering to like really, really deep play here, that this is a sleeper SP that outside the top 40 can massively blow past his current value.
Towers, I'm going to put you on the spot. Choose your Philly right now. Christopher Sanchez at 170 overall or Jesús Luzardo at 254 overall. And remember, you do have to do shows with Frank tomorrow.
I think I probably like Sanchez at his price more. It's weird because I thought he was kind of undervalued in like January drafts. It feels like everybody forgot how good he was last season. And then he has this velocity spike. He's sitting 97 this spring. And all of a sudden everyone's like, oh yeah, Christopher Sanchez. He was awesome last year.
He was pretty good.
I don't think he needs to be better than he was last season to justify this price. And that's why I like it. Is if all he does is hold, he's going to be a really good pick there. And if this new 2.5 mile per hour jump in sinker velocity sticks, I mean, he could be a top 20 SP this season.
All right, we're going to get to some more names on the sleeper list here. But before we do, a quick reminder, our MLB draft kit is available. So if you want to dominate your fantasy baseball drafts with our fantasy baseball draft kit, all you have to do is go to fantasypros.com/draft kit. That's right. You can view expert cheat sheets and rankings to build your perfect team, access up-to-date projections and expert recommendations on sleepers, busts, must-have players, and more. And remember, if you're a premium subscriber to Fantasy Pros, you gain access to our entire Discord there, where you can interact directly with our analysts through AMAs and other amazing fantasy baseball channels with all of the peanuts and the cracker jacks here around the Fantasy Pros MLB channel. Bookmark your fantasy baseball draft kit right now at fantasypros.com/draft kit for the latest fantasy baseball advice every single day throughout the fantasy baseball draft season. All right, let's get back to you, Frank Stampfl. You've been quiet for way too long, so I want to shake you around and talk about Thairo Estrada, a guy that I just took recently in a draft very late, saying, you know, he's in Colorado. If he's healthy, a bounce back of a guy who was really consistent for 2 straight years before the injury. And I feel like everyone's basically forgotten about how maybe kind of set it and forget it he was. And that was in San Francisco, not a very friendly ballpark environment for right-handed hitters, but Colorado, it could be a different version of Estrada if healthy this season.
I agree completely. I love Thairo Estrada as a middle infielder this season, coming off an injury-riddled year last year. He went on the IL twice with left wrist injuries, but he's been given a new life with the Colorado Rockies. We don't often talk very good about the Rockies, but it still is a great environment to hit in Coors Field. This is someone who was extremely useful the 2 years prior to last. He finished 94th overall back in 2022, 121st overall in 2023. Very consistent, as you pointed out, Joe. 260 to 270 batting average, 14 home runs, 21 to 23 steals. It's not like he's old. He's 29 years old, so still in his prime. And no surprise, but in 24 career games in Coors Field, he has been awesome. 348 batting average, 4 homers, 6 doubles, 18 RBI, 3 steals, a 971 OPS. And I can see Estrada giving you a similar skill set to someone like Bryson Stott or Andres Jimenez, maybe even a better batting average in both of those guys playing half his games in Coors Field. 270 plus, 15 home runs, 25 steals. And he's going 150 to 200 picks later than both of those guys. So yes, give me all the Thairo Estrada in roto leagues as a middle infielder, a little bit of pop, good batting average, and some sneaky speed as well.
Yeah, hasn't shown a lot of power yet in spring this year, but hitting 423. The OPS is at 929, but doesn't have a home run quite yet. Only a triple to his name, no doubles either, but does have a stolen base. So let's watch him. Again, one of these players where spring training is important because you want to see that he's healthy. You want to see that he's making good contact, and so far so good. Estrada is definitely one of those guys. I want to get back to you, Towers, for another one of the names on your list here. And let's talk about a pitcher named Mike Soroka, who has been around for a while, a guy that doesn't have the biggest strikeout stuff. So why is Soroka somebody intriguing to you this season?
Well, that's the thing is last year when he transitioned to a multi-inning role for the White Sox, you probably didn't notice because it was Mike Soroka on the White Sox pitching in relief, but he had like the second highest strikeout rate of any reliever in baseball last season from July 1st on. He jumped up to like a 40% strikeout rate. That wasn't sustainable, obviously. But what he did was, if you remember when Mike Soroka was like winning rookie of the year or competing for rookie of the year, it was all sinkers and a little bit of sliders. And that was basically it. Last year in the bullpen, he realized he had to change, had forearm issues, ruptured his Achilles twice, comes back last season in the bullpen, starts throwing four-seamer almost exclusively, four-seamer and slider, and gets this huge jump in whiff rate, gets this huge jump in strikeout rate. And this spring, he's also throwing the four-seamer about 1.5 miles per hour harder. So I went into the season, to the draft season with Mike Soroka as like he's just a head-to-head points guy, but as a spark, maybe he figures something out, sticks in the rotation, and can be useful in that format. Now that we're seeing him throwing 94, 95 miles per hour at that four-seamer, getting a lot of whiffs with it, the slider is getting a little more two-plane movement, about 2 extra inches of both vertical and horizontal break. He's bringing the changeup back. He's throwing the sinker a little bit to righties as well. I think there's a chance Mike Soroka could actually matter for fantasy. And, there's been a lot of joking about the Washington Nationals over the past couple of seasons and how they seem a little behind the times with their pitching development, but they got some really good results out of a handful of pitchers last season. Mackenzie Gore finally started to show some more of that upside. Mitchell Parker was pretty useful. DJ Hers had some stretches. So they've done some good stuff. I think Michael Soroka is going to be the number 5 there. And there is a little bit of even like a 12-team roto upside here starting to emerge.
Especially when you look at like some of the offense too, like the Washington Nationals offense could be sneaky.
Could be decent,
Dylan Cruz is hitting at the top of the lineup. I mean, I'm a little anti CJ Abrams, but if that starts piecing together, there might be a little bit of run support. There might be some decent defense. They just might be one of those teams that they don't like go and do anything big. You're not going to be like a Royals getting into a playoff or anything, but they might be a little bit more competitive than we're giving them credit for.
Big Dance has a question here. Accept or decline? Got offered Trey Turner, Schwarber, and Reagans for Ozzie Albies, Michael Harris, and Zach Wheeler. Frank Stampfl, what do you think about this trade here on the table?
That seems like a pretty fair trade. I lean with the Phillies plus Reagans here. I like all the players involved, but Phillies offense should be really good. Cole Reagans, an ace as well. I mean, not to the same level as someone like Zach Wheeler, but yeah, I think I would go with the first part of that. Turner, Schwarber, and Reagans.
Welsh, do you agree?
Yeah, I was kind of just staring through this, and sometimes like a simplicity of trades I'll even do with people, and they message me. I'll just be like, all right, Trey Turner or Albies. I'll take Turner. Schwarber, Michael Harris. I think I would take, I mean, maybe it's a trade-off. I know where you're going, Joe, but maybe Schwarber, Wheeler, and Reagans. Like, yeah, Wheeler, but Reagans is not that far off. Like, I really think it flows in the Philly and Reagan side.
Towers, the only thing I keep looking at is, when Ozzie Albies is healthy, 2 of the last, 4 years, 30, 100, 100 kind of guy. That's kind of tempting for me. I don't feel like Trey Turner's that dude anymore. Schwarber and Harris is a weird push for me. And then you got Wheeler, who is very consistent, and Reagans, who at times struggle with consistency, but we know how healthy, how good he is at times. Do you think that this is a trade where you want the Turner Schwarber side, or do you want the Harris Wheeler Albie side?
This is the kind of trade I really struggle with when we get asked, because it really does almost feel like just a coin flip. And because like all 3 types of players are very similar, big strikeout pitchers, I guess a little more speed on one side with Harris over Schwarber, but I don't know. It probably just comes down to like, who are your alternatives at DH? Because Schwarber obviously being DH only, that can hurt your flexibility. If you've got a viable DH, maybe I pass on that if I'm getting Schwarber. But otherwise, it probably just comes down to team context and what the rest of your lineup comes down to. I would lean the Turner side, because I do still think there is a 40 steal season left in Trey Turner's legs. He was on a 50 steal pace before the hamstring injury last May. I still think there's just a little more upside on that side of the trade.
All right. Remember, if you want your question absolutely answered here in the next 5 minutes, super chats are the way to do it. Here's another question from Kevin. Kevin over here, Langford at $23 or Lawrence Butler at $12. Chris Welsh, let's start with you on this one.
Don't go to me on the first one. This is a tough one, because I was like, I saw Langford at Butler, and I'm like, oh, Langford. And I was like, oh, $11
cost,
difference.
literally
with
half the
Herrera.
cost. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there might be a tiny bit of context in here. Like, if this is like a big constructed team and, you're saving some dollars, like Lawrence Butler is probably the easy answer. I just still think there are maybe more questions on the overall hit tool, though he, second half was great. He's answered them through this spring, got his contract. Those are all really good. Trying to get shorter to the ball. Those are big, huge things for us. So maybe the questions are less, but they're still there. But based on that price difference, if I'm tight on money, it's Butler. If I'm a little bit more loose, I just don't think I could let go of Langford right now.
All right. Frank Stampfl, your thoughts on this one, Butler or Langford at cost?
I think both are top tier breakout candidates this season, but give me the savings there on Lawrence Butler.
Yeah, I think that's where I lean to. Towers, how about you?
Absolutely. I'll save the money. I have Langford, maybe 15, 20 spots higher in the overall rankings, but that's not worth $12 for me.
Yeah. Butler being at the top of that lineup too. Exciting. Getting out of that ballpark. Exciting. I think we can all agree on that. Here's an interesting one. Going back to one of the guys we talked about, Sanchez or Hunter Brown. Towers, let's start with you in this one.
I think I have Hunter Brown ahead, and I do. And that's one of those ones that I can't figure out how much I actually like Hunter Brown. So if it's just heads up, I'll take Brown. I think he's ranked higher. He'll go higher. He'll be more expensive in any auction. But if you start to talk about any kind of discount for Sanchez, that could really easily push it his way.
But what about at cost? What about if it's like, Hunter Brown, who is like top 90 and Chris Sanchez is outside the top 150. So I'm going to just give you an arbitrary Hunter Brown at 95 or Chris Sanchez at 155.
I'll take the discount on Sanchez there. Yeah.
Okay. Cause that's more what you're looking at here.
Mm-hmm.
Frank, do you agree?
Yeah, when you add the context of where they're going, I would much rather take a shot on Sanchez. Just straight up, I have Hunter Brown a few spots ahead of my starting pitcher rankings, but they have gotten closer. I have moved Sanchez and guys like Robbie Ray and Gavin Williams way up my starting pitcher rankings throughout spring training. Those guys have been big risers. So Sanchez not far off from Hunter Brown. Just if you give me the ADPs of those two, I'll take the savings on Sanchez.
Here's another fun one from Charlie. Schwellenbach or Bryce Miller? I think I know Welsh's answer to this, which is he is Team Schwellenbach all the way. Stampfl, what side are you on when it comes to these two arms?
Yeah, make it 2 for 2. I love Spencer Schwellenbach this year. He was the player I love on the Valentine's Day episode that we did. Just 6 different pitches. He throws hard. He's got great control. He pitches for a really good team. It's a little bit worrisome that his innings jumped up so much from one year to the next last season. But, yeah, I love the pitchability. I love the strikeout minus walk rate. Bryce Miller was great too. It's a close call, but I do like Spencer Schwellenbach more.
Yeah, aren't they kind of the same guy? Except Bryce Miller just did it for 180 innings, and Spencer Schwellenbach has never thrown that many innings in a season in his life. Similar pitch mixes, similar skill sets. They both throw a ton of strikes. Miller may be on a worse team, but better home park. I'll go with Miller here.
There's kind of a like multi-pitchability thing too, because I talked to Bryce Miller this spring and he's like, I'm working on, a cutter now. And it's like, you're going to throw a cutter and you're going to throw a gyro split slider. And then you're going to throw a sweeper. You're just throwing all different variations. He's always tinkering. That's one thing I don't know if I've loved about, or I'm learning to not like about George Kirby and the tinkering. Schwellenbach could get there, but I wonder if this year you go from the 5 pitches you throw 10% of the time to honing in a tiny bit more, and we see more splitter usage, and that kind of hones him in a tiny bit. But they are kind of similar-ish guys.
All right, last one here from our friend Joey Navarro. Sonny Gray, Gallen, or Joe Ryan? Chris Towers, you're on the clock. Who are you taking?
They're all pretty similar. I do have Joe Ryan ranked a little bit ahead. There's a little bit of concern with that shoulder issue that ended last season, but I think the skill set is so strong there. So I will go with him. I will say Gallen and Gray are phenomenal values this season. People hate Zach Gallen. I've seen him drop to like 140 in some drafts.
Picked him up in a draft that I'm in right now, and another one where I don't get. I'm old enough to remember when Zach Gallen was competing for Cy Youngs.
Yeah, he was like a top 50 pick. Not that long ago.
I don't understand this one. I'm actually Gallen on this because I love the offense he plays on, and I feel like that's the easier path for wins, as opposed to Joe Ryan and everybody on his offense constantly being hurt, and Sonny Gray having no offense at all. Welsh, Gray, Gallen, or Ryan?
Yeah, I mean, I guess no shock. I'm going to say Gallen here. Like I got Joe Ryan and Gallen like super, super close, but Gallen pressure pushes down a little bit with Corbin Burns. You're in a contract situation as well. Still lots of offense. I think the health of not pitching 250 freaking innings with, playoffs and a World Series going is going to work well. And hopefully also, I think he understands. He went really crazy, like change up and knuckle curve. And I think the mix is going to change out a little bit. So I'm, a little homery here, but Zach Allen.
Stampfl?
I like all three at their values. I'll go with Joe Ryan. I like the changes he made last year, throwing harder, throwing more sweepers. He's a great contributor for whip as well. It's just, I really like that whip from Joe Ryan. So I will take him.
All right. We're going to say goodbye to our friends at CBS. It was so fun to hang out with you. Thanks for making the time for us. Go check out all of their work as well. They're the best in the business for a reason. And hopefully we'll be seeing more of you in the weeks and months to come.